Welcome back to the Nature of Mental Health. Today we're talking about nature mandalas, an exercise that is not only fun, but powerful and insightful. We are joined by a fellow graduate of my spring 2022 cohort from the Center for Nature-Informed Therapy, Laura Cohen. Laura is a registered counseling therapist, originally from Montreal, Canada, but is now based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. She's the founder of Laura Cohen Mental Health and Consulting and holds a master's degree in counseling psychology from McGill University. She's also a Canadian Certified Counsellor. Laura specializes in nature-informed therapy, integrating counseling with time spent outdoors to help clients regulate their nervous systems, reconnect with themselves, and process life transitions like burnout, stress, and questions of identity. Laura also teaches and trains other counselors how to incorporate nature therapy and imagery-based tools into their clinical work through workshops. In 2024, she presented on imagery and spirituality at a conference at Harvard Divinity School. This episode will have visual imagery in it, so if you want to see the mandalas we will be unpacking, feel free to tune in on YouTube or Spotify for the video edition. I think we do a good job of describing the mandalas we will be looking at, but they can be quite beautiful, so feel free to check out the video version as well. Sit back and enjoy this episode as Laura and I discuss nature mandalas and their use from both a clinical and personal perspective. Welcome to the Nature of Mental Health, the podcast where we explore how time outdoors supports emotional well-being, resilience, and healing. I'm your host, Will Henry, clinical social worker, nature-informed therapist, and founder of Riverstone Mental Health Collective. Join me as we dive into practical tools, meaningful conversations, and inspiring stories that help us reconnect with the natural world and ourselves. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Thanks for joining me again on the Nature of Mental Health. Today's topic is a lot of fun. We're going to be talking about nature mandalas. I'm really excited to welcome not only a fellow graduate from the Center for Nature-Informed Therapy, but she also graduated with my spring 2022 cohort. So please welcome Laura Cohen to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I wanted to also let our listeners know that we're going to be discussing nature mandalas today. So, but if you want to watch the video version of the podcast, we'll be pulling up some pictures of mandalas and kind of unpacking them. So if you want to check us out on YouTube or Spotify, videos are there as well. I thought we'd start by asking you, Laura, a little bit about yourself and your practice and like what you got going on up there in Nova Scotia.
Yeah. So I'm a registered counseling therapist in Halifax, Canada, out here in Nova Scotia. And I have my own little practice. It's a counseling and consulting practice. So I see clients one-on-one, and I do nature therapy. So I bring people outside, of course. And I also do, good old classic talk therapy, but I also do training for other clinicians on how to use nature-informed therapy in their clinical practice. But also I do some workshops, which I'm really excited to do more of now on using more Jungian approaches and tools like projective techniques
Cool.
in the clinical setting. And so that could include like mandalas, but it could also include like using tarot in a clinical setting too. But today we'll maybe focus more on the mandalas.
Yeah. What made you want to take like the NIT, the Nature Informed Therapy certification? Like I know that we both were in the same cohort. What attracted you to the program?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was COVID, so I spent a lot of time outside. That was like my refuge. And I was the fifth person in Nova Scotia to get COVID-19.
Wow.
So
okay.
so it was early days and it was very scary when that happened. So, and I had it before they instated the quarantine. So I was able to go outside while I had it for the
Really
first
one
maybe
of the
week.
first. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I found this little refuge. Anyways, long story short, I ended up just recognizing, and I grew up, being outside, and my parents are nature lovers, especially my mother, and always felt good, obviously, but I thought to myself, there has to be, clinical kind of approach or framework around this. And of course, there's ecotherapy. I started doing research on that and then found the training, and I was like, I'm just going to go and do this. So, yeah.
I had a great experience. I was like, kind of thinking about that recently, what got me started. And I've like similarly, my father really instilled nature in me. We went camping all the time. I grew up in nature. It was like my second home. And I was looking for, what attracted me to the Center for Nature Informed Therapy was their science, research-based, evidence-based practices. And so I went in there expecting all of the science, and I was going to, get all of this stuff. And what I ended up with was like that and so much more, because it really, like, I had the connection with nature, and I had the science information, but what that I was learning the science information at the program, but what it really did was kind of connect that. It made this connection that was so profound, and it, I think, closed the loop. It was like the puzzle piece that I was missing to close the loop for my connection with nature, which I thought was really just impactful, and got more out of it than I thought I would. So it was great.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I also picked the Center for Nature Informed Therapy because it was evidence-based. It was tied to a university, and Heidi was a clinical psychologist, but I also knew that they weren't afraid of approaching this topic with a creative, sort of imaginal, right brain, holistic approach, that sort of psychospiritual approach as well. So
right. Which
yeah.
that's what the piece that I think made the connection for me. And shout out to Heidi Schreiber-Pan, who's just brilliant, and like the guru. So I was saying, I wanted to ask you, you're my first international guest, and I believe that you were the person that made the Center for Nature Informed Therapy international program, which is really cool. But I was curious, there's so many like different perspectives across the globe, right, of therapy. And what does that look like? I mean, and I say that because I got a friend that lives in the south of France right now, and I'm often saying I should move out of the country because, just because. And she was like, well, there's not a lot of therapy jobs over here. People don't think of therapy in the same way. It's not as big of a thing. Everybody's like, no. How is it in Canada, in Nova Scotia? I mean, you have a practice, so I imagine they're more receptive to it. And how does that look there?
In therapy in general, I mean, counseling is a regulated field here in Nova Scotia. There's only 5 provinces, I think, at this point that are regulated in Canada. So not all of the provinces regulate counseling, but psychologists are. I would say it's like pretty popular. Like it seems like everybody tends to have a therapist, at least in my generation. And there's now an abundance of therapists because there's Yorkville University that's kind of churning out a lot of therapists nowadays, and so there's more access to therapists, which is a good thing.
That's good. Yeah, that's great.
But which is a new thing. I think post-COVID that trend started.
That's a good point. Yeah, because there's been so much, the effect that the pandemic had on the world, right, on everyone, the isolation, it really brought the mental health crisis to the forefront, right? Everybody was like, whoa, what's happening? My son, freshman year of college, goes into school. The president of the college, meets with all the parents, orientation day. And he's like, listen, I understand what's happening, with your children. 30% of the incoming freshmen have a mental health diagnosis. And I was like, oh, 30%, because it was like 20%, 5-10 years before that, before COVID. And it's like, maybe it's just because it's art school, maybe, I don't know, but it's something to do with it. But that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's been collateral damage from COVID, right? In terms of mental health epidemic and the loneliness epidemic that we talk about in the nature therapy world too. And one of the facts I remember Heidi providing to us was, if you see your clients experiencing loneliness, encourage them to develop a relationship with the natural world and natural creatures, even a tree. And, we can have that transpersonal kind of relationship with the non-human world.
Absolutely. And I talk a lot about relationship in practice, connection in my practice. And that's such an important piece that it doesn't have to be person to person, right? And one of the things that Heidi taught me, or the training taught me, was about, you can have relationship with place as well. It's with the tree, with the animals, with each other, but with place, and that's an important aspect to really consider.
Totally, yeah.
Totally. Well, I wanted to, talking about mandalas. In our pre-interview, we were talking about stuff, and you're such a wealth of knowledge around like image-based tools in therapeutic settings. My first question, I guess, to you would be, what is a mandala? right?
Hmm.
What is it for those
Mm.
that maybe don't know,
Mm. Well, I'll do my best to define it. I'm from so a mandala is something that originates from time immemorial. Basically, it's been found. It's a symbol that's been found across cultures and times, specifically in the Buddhist traditions, in Hinduism, even in Jewish scriptures. Um, and so it's Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and one of the founding fathers of modern day psychology, who basically introduced it, I would say even reappropriated it for Western psychology. And so
Mm-hmm.
he even had his clients draw out mandalas and he would psychoanalyze them. So he really saw the mandala as like an archetype, one of the most important archetypes in the human psyche. So that's what I know about mandalas. It's also a circular shape. There's more to it. It could, be seen as a psycho-spiritual, meditative symbol.
Right.
But
That was my
yeah.
experience with it. Cause I mean, my knowledge of mandalas was going like in New York City into the village, into one of these Eastern, shops, and you see the tapestries hanging on the wall with the beautiful ornate mandalas. That was my experience. That's what I knew about it. And I didn't know much. So, and, so you were alluding to how they've been used kind of historically and their meaning. So, and Carl Jung, right, was the one that brought that can you speak, like, what else can you tell us about that, about
Yeah.
his?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Carl Jung is sort of an interesting figure in that he had this very, you could say, like holistic approach to psychology. His view of psychology was more of a philosophy, humanities, and he kind of resisted that he was, spiritual. He didn't like, I guess, that term, but he did have like this. He did come up with the concept of collective unconscious and
Mm,
synchronicities and archetypes. So these are the concepts that we use today. We're in a post-Jungian world where people recognize those terms. And the mandala is just one of those tools that, has been adopted in modern day psychology, or at least in like expressive arts or art therapy, and in nature therapy too. But basically a mandala, just like any art or image, is used in the therapeutic sense as a projective technique. And when I say projective technique, what I mean by that is like when we think of the Rorschach ink block test or the thematic apperception test, those are two assessments that I was trained on at McGill University when I did my counseling psych program.
mm-hmm,
We were trained professionally on how to interpret and administer those two tests, which are basically these images that are ambiguous, and people project meaning onto them, and
mm,
we facilitate the assessment through prompts, and asking people questions to kind of allow them to externalize their narrative. What are their motivations? What are their internal conflicts and thoughts, feelings, insecurities onto images, which is a very, projecting meaning onto symbols is just a natural human cognitive process.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we just kind of use that in the therapeutic sense. So it's not religious, it's not moral versus immoral. Some people kind of think these things are woo woo, but it's
hmm
actually just a very traditional kind of
yeah,
therapeutic process in a way. So,
right. No,
yeah.
absolutely. And it's, you were alluding to like the mandala's use in nature therapy, right? So you're thinking about the Rorschach tests and that projecting. I like the framework that you're giving us. So the instructions, right, to make one are go collect uh, items in nature, rock, stone, sticks, whatever, things you find laying around, and you make a circle with a centerpiece. And that's it. That's your guidance, whatever that means to you, right? Do you have anything to add to the instruction part? Like,
Yeah, that's usually what I would tell a client is follow your intuition, I
yeah,
guess your inner child, your intuition. Don't
mm,
overthink it, and then
yeah,
just collect the natural items that you find naturally on the ground and just forage. And then usually 20 minutes to 30 minutes to create a round shape in the centerpiece. And then we start to unpack it after.
yeah.
Yeah.
That intuition piece is important, and that's why I did this exercise, and we'll show a few and unpack a few mandalas later, um,
Yeah.
at my former job. And I'm very careful not to say, well, this is what, you just say, go do this. go out, collect these items, what calls to you, what, and that's it. And let them lead from there, right? So it's almost like, it's like an open-ended question, but you're asking them to gather materials.
Yeah. Yeah. And allows people to get into their somatic bodies, their intuitive bodies, and
Such an
connect
important
with.
point.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about that before, just getting out of that hyper rational over, analyzing mind and into our bodies and intuition, which is a great way to process and work with clients.
Right. We talk about, health being physical, mental, and emotional and social, right? It's all these aspects. And I think it's, when I'm working with, here in my office, working with clients with anxiety, they're often in their head overthinking things. I was talking about this the other day and trying to get them into their bodies. And this is like a step further. You're trying to connect with your body, your intuition, and what it's telling you. And then you're projecting that onto these items that you're collecting and forming a representation of whatever it is that, your intuition's telling you.
Yeah, whatever's going on in your life. I've had people, collect items without me prompting them, and then they create the mandala, and then it ends up actually being like a genogram, which is,
Wow.
I think one of your other guests had spoken about a genogram, but this idea where they just collect, rocks and leaves and little dead flowers, and then they set them up in a certain way in the mandala, and then when we start to unpack it, it's actually it's a family member. Each rock and flower is actually somebody
That's
they know.
powerful.
Yeah, so it's usually just kind of externalizing their, what's going on in their life, and in a creative and in a creative way, but with the backdrop of nature. And there's all this life happening in session too. Things are happening while we're doing this that informs also the healing process, whether it's a bird squawking. I have so many examples of different animals or sounds or, experiences that people have while we're outside in the outdoor environment that that contributes to the session. And that's why we call nature a co-therapist in the
Yes.
nature therapy world, right?
Mm-hmm.
It provides that life and that backdrop.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking about that last week, and the previous episode to this we released we're recording this day before the equinox, so it comes out tomorrow. But when this comes out, it'll be last week. But we were talking about the co-therapist, and sometimes, my Lolly, my guest, was saying, sometimes you can the personification almost. You can look at the tree and say, "Is this the right time? Do I need to step in now? Is this what is?" Because there's a relationship and that connection, right? Which we
Absolutely.
talk about. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I wanted to, you've beautifully illustrated, like, when you're unpacking things, like what they can mean and what they can represent. You said something in a pre-interview. I want to kind of quote you and give you a second to talk about, because I thought it was really important. You said nature mandalas can help people access emotions and insights that talk therapy alone can't reach, right? And I think you were talking about like neurodiverse people. Can you elaborate on that? Like
Yeah.
how that's such an important point.
Totally. Yeah. So nature therapy in general, but this particular technique using mandalas can allow people to access, thoughts, emotions, experiences, feelings that they might have and that they might not have the words for. So, talk therapy, people who are less verbal or just have more challenge finding the right words to express themselves. This other type, this approach of nature informed therapy can help make therapy just more accessible. And sometimes there isn't words. Sometimes it's just creating something tangible and having somebody hold space and witness that and have
That's so
compassion. And
powerful. Wow,
yeah,
that was
yeah,
beautiful. Absolutely.
yeah,
And I think it's important, you think about what you're saying about the people that are less verbal and trying to communicate. Like, communication is not just words, right? There's
right.
body language, but art is communication. And mandalas are like, they really are pieces of art.
Yeah,
And when you go to, a museum even, right? And you look at a painting or you look at a sculpture and you look at something that speaks to you. There's no words coming out. Sometimes there is, but if you're talking about a sculpture or a painting, there's no actual words coming out, but it's so loud sometimes. And I think that's really, that connects to this making nature mandalas, and that connects so well.
Yeah.
to what you're saying.
Yeah, and it speaks to our inner child, right? Like
Mm,
those parts of us that are just sometimes not always at the forefront. We're just working adults, with our frontal cortex is hyper aware and just very, at the computers. And so getting outside and getting in touch with, the dirt and leaves and everything can bring out our inner child. And that can be really, really therapeutic for a lot of people.
absolutely.
Hmm.
That they're sometimes those inner children are screaming at us, and
Yeah.
that's my experience anyway. And
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
really nature mandalas can really it gives that inner child that intuition that gives them voice in a way that, like we were talking about, it's not always words, but the pictures speak 1,000 words, right?
Exactly. And I know we were also going to talk about like when we were first introduced this activity during our training.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Absolutely. That tell me about your experience with that.
yeah, I just remember like it was our last day of our nature informed therapy training, and this was all in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And we were guided to make a mandala ourselves with natural items that they had provided. I took the conch shell that they had provided in the basket, and then I went out to forage just like you and everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And then anyway, my first impression was like, oh, this is a little silly. Like, what is this going to do? Like, this is, a little weird, whatever. And then I just went with it. And then it ended up being one of the most profound kind of therapeutic things I ever got trained in. And, when we unpacked it together in the small groups, it was actually, yeah, just very profound is the word that comes to mind for
Yeah,
me. And I
absolutely.
was sold and I was like, this is something I have to do with clients. It's just, it, it addresses all the aspects. It's the biopsychosocial, spiritual, um, you know, element of therapy. It kind of tackles everything. So
It does.
yeah. And then I've unpacked it with clients who've also had sort of that attitude and they're like, they trust me, so they're open to trying things, but they're like, okay, sure, mandala, what are we doing? And they're maybe not the most uh maybe artistic or whatever, but they were open and we ended up having some of the most profound, in-depth kind of sessions after they've made mandalas and had some really great insights.
I had a very similar experience, and
Hmm.
I still remember mine. I want you to pull yours up here in a minute. Where I'm going to ask you if you have it. You have a picture of it, right? You were saying.
I couldn't find it actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well. Maybe we'll describe it.
Okay.
And my mandala ended up being more like an oval, and I wasn't like I'm a perfectionist, and things need to be just right, for me to be satisfied, right? But I was like, let me trust this process. What the pieces it called to me did not make a circle; they made an oval.
Right.
So I put that down. And I was like, I'm going to trust this process. And it ended up being, like you were saying, really profound and really powerful. And when we, the things that people see, other people, because, right, we talk about in therapy, like for me anyway, in my office, we talk about everyone carries all of their experiences with them. And so their view of your experience is from the outside and it's so unique. And so having other people look at this thing you made, and have their perspective, it was really just like very insightful and it gave me a lot of to think about and ponder, and really it was moving.
Yeah. What were some of the things that came out from your mandala?
Well, it was an oval, and I used some. I'm trying to remember. It was like a couple of like sticks, but they were like oval shaped, and I had like 2, 3 or 4 of those, and then I had a lot of what did I have in mind? Pine cones and pine needles and things like that. I'm trying to remember. I believe I had a stone in the center with some pine cones, like little bitty pine cones. Almost they look like seed pods, but they weren't.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, instead, it looks like you're trying to let go, which stuck with me because that's exactly what I was doing. And for someone else to see that just from this imperfect mandala, was really powerful for me. That I'm able to express myself without words, right? And that's the artist, I guess, within me is it struck a chord.
It sounds like it was empowering.
It was. Oh, thank you. Yes, very, very well put. Yeah, absolutely, it was empowering.
Mm-hmm.
It was
And you
very
felt
green.
seen.
Well, I felt seen.
Seen.
I did. I love that. Yeah. Tell me about
Yeah.
yours. You said you had a conch
I
shell,
had a
right?
conch in the middle, and then I took pine branches coming out of the conch, so there was a circular shape, but there was no boundary to make the
Mm.
circle. And so, yeah, some of the takeaways were around like um boundaries. Um but with my clients, I did have a client once who I brought this activity forth with, and for this person, they created the mandala and then we unpacked it, and I asked them why they chose. One of the prompts is, why did you choose those items? Why did you place it in this place? And she had said that she picked those items because they were kind of ugly, but there was a beauty in them, or there was an imperfection about them. And then she started to realize through the prompting and the conversation, she was like, oh, this is like a reflection of how I feel about myself.
Mm.
And she had an aha moment around that, and that she's like, oh, I kind of, I don't find myself attractive, or I find myself like sort of that negative self-talk. But she was able to appreciate, in the end, that there's like imperfections that she sees as actually just a reflection of nature, and that's okay. And there's beauty in that too. And it was just really nice. And it brought her to tears. And she was somebody who was kind of reticent about the whole activity in the first place. So I find
That's
that's actually a
powerful.
very common theme almost every time I do this with a client, is this idea of imperfection, like the beauty of imperfection in nature, and how,
Love that.
yeah, and how they see that reflected in themselves. So,
I've never had
yeah.
anyone actually, say, and I've only done this exercise. Like I've never done it like in an individual session. I usually do like walk and talks, and we kind of connecting with trees and nature and streams, and
Nice.
I'll do like the leaf on a stream exercise,
Oh,
right, or
cool.
something like that.
Right.
But I did do this with a workshop I did at my former job. It was therapists and teachers, and it was a school environment, so we were working with children. But it was really it was powerful. What you were speaking to about like the boundaries, and that comes up a lot in what I see in the ones that, on that particular day in particular. It really came up a lot. But what I was going to say was, like, I've always said, nature kind of has the monopoly on beauty and perfection in its imperfection, right? Because things in nature they don't have to be perfect. They are what they are. There's no judgment. We don't place judgment on them. And that's part of the connection we have, is looking at that mirror,
Yeah.
for ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, do you have any photos of any that you want
I
to kind of
have,
talk about? Yeah.
well, I have just one that like a client like made, and I can't seem to find my own, but I can
Yeah. If you want
show.
to share that, we can look at that one. And I have a couple to look at, which I thought would be, we could kind
Okay.
of unpack, but we're going to
Okay.
have to be descriptive about these things and what we see
Okay.
for those that are not watching but are listening.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you have the share button
Um,
down there. I think we'll see what we got here.
yeah.
There we
So
go.
this is
Ah, beautiful.
this is a mandala that was created by a client on the beach here in Nova Scotia during a nature therapy session. And this was done maybe in a half an hour, sort of
Mm-hmm.
on their own. And yeah, I mean,
What do we see here? So it's a very rocky, small, smooth pebble beach, light colored rocks. And within that, right? Wow.
yeah.
There's,
What do you see?
well, I mean, I want to describe what I first here, right? So we've got like there's this pebbled beach, beautiful pebbles, worn, smooth stones, lighter colors. But then on the outside, there are not large, but larger stones creating a circle. Within those I see some twigs and branches. What is that at the bottom?
It's
Right.
this?
No, above that. Is that a stone or a piece of driftwood?
Oh, yeah,
That,
driftwood. Yeah.
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 It's driftwood?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So it's a little piece of driftwood. And then these are lighter colored stones. And then within that is kind of like a tan colored ring of stones.
Yeah.
Yes. And then within that is I would say like a darker gray little center
Yeah.
ring of stones, and then a red What is that red piece in the middle?
Yeah,
Is
it's
that
like it's just a rock.
rock? Okay. But
Yeah.
it's like a reddish color rock.
Yeah. It's
I see a
different
couple
than
of
the
seed
other
pods
ones.
in the outside too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one on the bottom there, I see like a little seed pod. That's one too. But down a little to the bottom left, that little seed pod down there.
Yeah, and then there's some
The
seaweed.
brown seaweed. That's what that is. Okay, I thought it
And
was a
some
seed pod.
bark.
And bark. Okay.
Bark. Yeah, and sticks.
What do you see when you were unpacking this? What did this?
Yeah. I think it just felt very hardy and grounded. I mean, rocks in itself, it's a very grounding kind of material in the natural world. And there's a heaviness, but like in a good way. It's just when I see this, I just feel like very protected. It's like very, very, a lot of protection. It also reminds me of sort of like a fire pit, like a gathering.
Oh yeah, I love that. I'm also struck by the different I don't want to use the word concrete, but distinct layers, right? So the outside colors create the layers, and then choosing the red stone that's unlike the others. It's not smooth and worn like the other stones. It's this red, it's more jagged.
Yeah. I think like one of the main sort of takeaways here was this client's inspiration around the process of making this. Like this person, this is not something that they do on a regular basis, and it was a very meditative process for them. And they felt like, wow, I think they said to me, I'm going to do this like regularly. I'm going to go to the beach and like create mandalas. And so, it was just more of a meditative process. And there was a lot of unpacking around like, that protection piece and that need for boundaries and protection. But then there's also like the sprinkling of these very light, fragile, just more sort of fragile, lightweight kind of material, just sort of sprinkled on the top. So, that can allude to, certain maybe personality traits or family members.
Maybe.
Vulnerabilities, yes, is their word. Yeah.
And the courage that it can take. I mean, to put themselves out there in small snippets almost, right? Just little bits of natural seed pods and the little twigs that are fragile, putting that on the outside, but they're sporadic. It's not, so it's.
Yeah, it's sporadic. Exactly. So there's like an imperfection. It's just, I love it because it's not perfect. It's just kind of asymmetrical and it's almost more beautiful. We talk about how, in social or evolutionary psychology, they talk about how beauty is all about like symmetry and symmetrical kind of shapes and faces and things like that. But, there's such beauty in asymmetry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love also that, this is a stone rock mandala on top of a rock beach, but it stands out also, which is something that's striking to me, is that it stands out though it matches so well with its background. So you have to kind of focus for just when you first put it up. I was like, I had to kind of focus in a little bit and be okay. Oh, and then all of a sudden it popped, which spoke to me as well.
Yeah, this person did have a choice of going onto like the grassier landscape to do this, but they chose this landscape and it does blend in. And this person does have this way of blending in, like conforming too. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah. But
that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. I'd love to see the ones that you're going to share.
Yes. Let me pull these up here. Where's my? Yeah. Okay.
Take a sip.
Yeah, I've got several of them. These are the ones that were done from. So this was done in October, mid-October. So prime leaf change. There's still a few flowers around. So I thought we'd go through a couple of these because I have a wide variance.
This is gorgeous,
right? So I love this one. What we're looking at are. It's almost, and the way they arrange this, there's leaves, small leaves around the outside, creating a border. And then there's small sticks pointing inward toward a circle of, they look like seeds, or berries from maybe a holly bush and some seeds. There's a few flowers, purple flowers, and a red, I'm not even sure what that is. I know there's some small little flowers on top of something red.
Oh, yeah.
Can
Maybe
you
a
make out what
rose
that-
even.
Maybe a rose even, but
Yeah.
I hope they didn't pick a rose from the property.
Yeah. Usually we ask people to just forage ethically.
Forage and find things that are laying on the ground.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you'll see in a couple of these that it didn't all happen.
For
But
sure.
one of the things that stood out to me, two main things, was they chose some fungus. There's like some mushroom fungus from a tree that you see sporadically next to all the sticks that point inward or point outward, however you want to see that. And then the leaves that create the border, they're small little oval-shaped leaves, probably fell off of a bush. It looks like bush leaves, not full tree leaves. So, but they start green, they turn to a yellowish, and then they kind of fade as they go around. So it kind of represented like a cycle of life almost for me, like a cycle, transition, movement, change. I kind of saw that because it's like all the orange and yellow is at the bottom and this green and yellow over here to the dead leaf at the top with the green dying leaf, a couple of other dying leaves, dead leaves, and then back into the yellow. It's like
True.
I spoke change, transition, metamorphosis. I don't know.
True. That is a
along.
great observation. Yeah. The change in color, like Roy G. Biv, we're going yellow, orange, green, brown.
Mm-hmm.
Just to quote one of your other guests who mentioned how nature is a mentor, but also a mirror, and nature can mirror adaptation, change, internal conflicts, like resilience. Nature can be a mirror in many ways. And so when we're looking at metamorphosis or like change here, I love the change in colors. It's just sort of a mirror for what maybe that person may be going through or what they're desiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that. What I notice is sort of this person, could be very open. There's an openness. There's, openness between, there's not like a tight knit boundary. Once again, that's kind of one of the first things I look at around the circle.
Same.
Yeah. But it's like, there's a beauty in being open and airy.
There are boundaries, but there's gaps within those boundaries. There's and the shifting in the colors shows, I think, a flexibility.
Yeah. Yes. The shifting in colors would do that for sure. And there's a lot of variety and diversity. Like I wonder if their life is just full of a lot of maybe hobbies or interests or life, different types of people, but it seems like there's an eclecticness.
I should point out, actually, that's a really good insight, Laura, that these were done by pairs of people, because it was a workshop and there were like, I want to say 15 people, 18 people, something like that in the workshop. And we didn't have a room for everyone to do their own. So I was like, okay, just pair up and go out. So this is actually kind of, when I was walking around, watching people make them, it was like, I did notice that people were taking turns. Okay, I'm going to work on the centerpiece and I'm going to work on the outside. And they would talk about what that means to each of them. And they kind of worked out, which was, I thought, fascinating. I've never tried to do this with pairs before, but that's how this one ended up working out. This particular one, I remember who the two people that did this, and they worked together to create this piece. I'm trying to think of who did what, but
does that make sense? That diversity, eclecticness?
Yes, that's what brought that up for me. Was the eclecticness, because there were actually two people working on this one, and some of the pair of people, one person was less interested than the other, right? And one person took over. That's kind of how dynamics work sometimes, right? But I'm going to move on to another one here, which is strikingly different. Whereas you get the solid, firm boundaries protecting maybe something strong in the center. So what we see here is a solid border of small twigs, right? So, but it creates a solid circular border. They're, very little. I don't think they meant to have any gaps in this. There's small little wildflowers, a ring of those inside that. Inside that are little seed pods. I forget what kind of seeds they are, but they're the pods that the little seeds come out of. A few little green leaves and flowers with a stone on top of a red leaf and a seed pod on top of that stone, it looks like, or a seed. That's a seed from within the seed pod on top of that stone. So this one spoke volumes. Why don't you tell me? You go first.
Yeah, I just love I love this mandala. It's interesting how you said you like notice really strong concrete boundaries, but and it's true, there's no gaps. It's like tightly tied together. There's no in or out of this mandala, but they are twigs, so it's sort of like a thin wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, compared to the boulder rocks mandala that I showed earlier, but there's sort of like a starting big and then going closer into the center of the circle, they get smaller and smaller with the items. But yeah, there's like 3 layers. And I do wonder like that usually when there's like a distinct circular or distinct item in the middle, it usually kind of represents a person, usually themselves.
Yes, I see that as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder why they picked the rock and then another little pod on top. But it's like there's a fragility, there's a beauty kind of surrounding, there's a gentle kind of maybe it is protection, those green and white petals around the rock. It's sort of like I'm here, but I'm not completely open to the world. I have these I have these like sort of petals around me.
And I have something to offer, because what I'm seeing is like they have something that they're I like what you're saying about the thinness of the twigs and the fragility of the twigs, though they are it is a tight, circle. So I see that maybe as protective of this, having the seed on top of the stone, on top of the red leaf, I think is significant. The seed, because around the outside are seed pods, those spiny looking seed pods. And then in the center is a seed, I believe, from one of those. So the seed on top of the stone, on top of the leaf, like really speaks to me for some reason. And I love what you said about it's representative of the person. Definitely, I agree with that. And so maybe they're trying to protect with the ring of flowers, the beauty and the strength that's within them.
There's like it's almost like this one is like it feels like more of like a sanctuary.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I like how they played with purple, white. Like it's just, they did have fun. They played with the color.
Uh-huh.
And it feels like, yeah, this gentle refuge or something, like almost like I'm looking at this and it looks like almost like a palace. And then in the middle, it's like the king, and those the petals around are like the jokesters or the
what do you call
servers
them?
Or the jesters.
Jesters, yes, jesters.
The jesters, or the ones like answering to them, or I don't know. There's like, it almost feels like a royal mandala.
I like that. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Let's do one more. You got time for one more?
Let's do one more.
All right.
Yep.
One more. This one I think we looked at earlier, but let's unpack this one, because this was I love this thing. This was my favorite one of the day. Very, you used the word abundant when we looked at this before, and that is so true. So what we've got going on here is this there's 2 distinct sections, right? There's this outer ring and then this inner circle, not circle, but it's circular pile of things. But the outer ring has, there's a fern leaf, there's some, it looks like cedar branch, there's yellow, green leaves, there's like wheat straw looking things, there's a couple of flowers, there's bark, there's stone, it's moss, very full in comparatively to the other 3 that we've seen. It's very full. I like the word abundant. And then in the center is a roundish stone, the few stones around that, some of those purplish flowers as well, we saw from the last one, and a couple of seed pods. So this one really spoke to me.
Yeah, I remember you saying this person had lived a well-lived life. They were a little older, senior, they have grandchildren. So there's that I don't know, there's like that experience that you can see, an abundance of experience. And
Yes, because there's so many different objects that are there's just so much, it's so full. And I love the way you framed that, the abundance. I think that's
yeah, it's abundant. It's full of knowledge and experience and love and beauty. I do kind of see that there's a lot of diversity. Like it's not neat and clean like the
Mhm.
previous one. There's no
Correct.
patterns or like neatness to it. It's just kind of messy, but beautiful in its own way.
Right. And there's that gap between the outside circle and the inside circle. There's just a clean, or as clean as it can be with all the stuff that's there, but an empty circle.
Right. Yeah. It's not filled up. There is space.
Yes. Which at least for me speaks to, they're offering all of this abundance on the outside here, outwardly, and they're leaving space for and room for to take more in, to grow, maybe, protecting the beautiful strength that's on the inside because of the rocks and the flowers.
Yeah. It could be space for themselves, like giving themselves
Ah,
space, not
that's another good
giving
perspective.
themselves
Yeah.
space between their internal world, the external world. I don't know, maybe that the centerpiece there with all the little, they look like violets, or what are they called? Asters.
Asters, that may be what it is, actually. I believe
Yeah.
that is what it is. Yeah.
Asters and all these multicolored rocks. I wonder if those asters and all the rocks in the middle represent maybe family or their close loved ones or maybe their
Hmm.
colleagues, because I know this was done in a work setting. So
There was one person that did this, the majority of this. I remember the two people that did that. Is the woman I was speaking of did this one. The other kind of watched along. So she was very, very involved in making this. She had a great time with this. It was really powerful for her.
yeah.
Yeah, it was. I think the whole workshop was ending with this exercise. I think was really, moving. I wanted to do that in particular because that was my experience right back in here. I'm going to stop sharing that. Is this okay? You
Yeah,
good?
for sure.
Yeah. And go back to, there we are. Hello. 'Cause I
Hello.
can't see you. I have the screen up. It was impactful for her, and it had, it was so moving, like we were talking about earlier, doing this in our training. And I really wanted to end with this because I don't get to do this a lot. Like I say, I usually, in my sessions, nature sessions, not that I get to do them as much as I would like, but when I do them, they're more walk and talks, and we stop and connect and things like that. But we're talking about things, and I do the walk and talks primarily with younger people, who have a hard time sitting in the office facing me, trying to engage in that parallel posturing. Walking side by side kind of frees up some of the pressure, right?
Yeah, movement in conversation. I have
Oh,
some of my best conversations outside while I'm walking and talking with people. Yeah, because there's something about being in a sterile office, like just sitting still and looking somebody into the eyes, like it can be overstimulating for some
yeah,
people. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it helps with creative problem solving and processing when we're in movement. We're, as Dr. Heidi Schreiber-Pan says, we're human. The human body is a movement machine. We need to
Mm,
move to
that's accurate.
to function at a high capacity and
I was just
process.
talking
Yeah.
about that yesterday. I mean, not in so eloquently, but I was someone was commenting on, feeling very anxious person, like incredibly anxious person, and having a health issue. So triple the anxiety, right? But how much better they felt getting up and moving around. And then they've actually taken to journaling because they're like, I really gets out of my head. And so we're practicing that kind of stuff. But they commented on how the movement is so helpful. And I find that that's across the board. I mean, anxiety, right? It's a ball of energy inside of us,
Yeah.
and
It's
movement,
energy
it is energy, and
that
it's
needs to
up in our
be
head.
kind of, yeah, moved and processed and exerted.
Processed, yes. And movement helps process. I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we do assessments to see if, nature therapy is a good
Mhm.
fit. There's a lot of
Sure.
like hang-ups, and people like have phobias and things. So
Right. And
we have to,
sometimes it's appropriate for those people as well, and sometimes it's not, but that assessment process is really important, right?
yeah, but it sounds like you're, doing some great work with young people, and the mandala stuff could be, it's very conducive to working with youth as well.
Yes, it is. And I think the mandalas are I think so many people from young to older, right? All get so much out of it. It's such a powerful exercise and tool, to go
Yeah.
back to what we were talking about earlier on, is like a tool, a therapeutic tool that,
Yeah, it's just like as Carl Jung said, it's sort of he considered the mandala like a window into the soul, like as part of just being human, like we just are drawn to these circular shapes. Um and it's across all ages, of course. It's playful too. It's fun.
yes. Yes, I'm a big fan. I wrote a blog post actually about how kids and adults, kids are not the only ones that need to play. We need to play as adults because
Yeah,
it gets
we
that
need to.
creative energy out, whether
Mhm.
it's, taking a, paint by numbers class with a glass of wine, whatever it is, having fun, getting out, doing things, getting your hands dirty in the earth, whatever. We need to have fun.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, and it's art. It's just art. So that's why this is so conducive to art therapists will
Mm,
be familiar with this practice,
yes,
because
absolutely.
it's a form of expression.
It is
I'm not an
absolutely.
I'm not an art therapist, but it's just a technique that I've adopted into my practice. Yeah.
It's so expressive. I love the way that's a perfect word for it. It's so expressive. And as we talked about earlier, those that don't have the words or can't find the words, if they do have them, we don't always, I'm a verbal person, but I can't find the words half the time. And art, mandalas, they're all so expressive and they speak volumes.
I know. Yeah, it's great. Me too. I kind of obsess over words sometimes, and
Mm,
sometimes I just can't find the right words. And I write poetry too, and I do all kinds of different things, and I dance. But yeah, sometimes just creating something tangible like a piece of art can be really healing. It really does. It's like, oh, especially if you have somebody reflect back and unpack it with you, it's just you can feel so seen. It's
so
something
seen. I love
so
that. Yeah.
seen. Yeah.
I know we spoke at the top of the show about you have some events coming up. Why don't you tell us about what events you've got coming up there?
Okay, yeah. So I have a Healing Through Nature Mandalas workshop coming up for women April 11th here in Halifax. It's an outdoor group therapy 2-hour event. People can sign up for. There's limited spots for that. Really excited for that. And then on May 22nd, I'll be launching back by popular demand using tarot in a clinical setting. This was waitlisted and sold out the first time I ran this
Wow.
last month here in Halifax. And there's just like really people are thirsty for this kind of more holistic approach. And, when I say tarot, people get, raise eyebrows, but really
Hmm.
it's just a projective technique. It's just using
I was going to say
imagery.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, imagery and how to facilitate, you know, processing in a therapeutic sense and building an alliance. Yeah, it's actually become more important for people to consider like learning how to use tarot in a clinical setting and become tarot literate, because there are populations that do take to it and do find it therapeutic already,
Hmm.
even if they're not working with a therapist. So the younger populations, like
Yes.
the the digital age folks, we have the queer community
Hmm.
really take to tarot, and then we have the neurodiverse population where we're getting out of our traditional talk therapy, and into like that imagery work. And of course, anyone who is aligned with like paganism or any kind of like
Hmm.
alternative spirituality. So it's just a really
It's inclusive was the
it's
word that kept coming to
inclusive.
mind. That's the word that
It's
keeps coming to
inclusive.
mind for me.
Yeah.
And it is so, I mean, just art and imagery and these things that don't necessarily have to have words. It's so inclusive. I
Yeah,
love that.
exactly. Actually, there is one other point I forgot to
Yeah.
make that I spoke last time about, and it ties into this, is we're okay, yeah, it's around like Carl Jung. And so this idea that Carl Jung used to have this, his philosophy with psychology was more of a humanities, it was a philosophy, it was psychospiritual. Essentially, that's why him and like Freud broke up, was because of his different perspectives on psychology. And he, obviously was one of the founding fathers of the field of psychotherapy and psychology. And then in the 1980s, we saw more of that trend with like behavioral sciences and CBT. And now there's like this beautiful mix, this combination that I really love and appreciate of evidence-based approaches. And now we're seeing, Carl Jung's influence coming in with these more, holistic approaches that are being influenced, that are influencing these evidence-based approaches like DBT and ACT and IFS. Now we're seeing IFS is becoming really popular. So so it's really nice to see that nice combination. And I'm somebody who uses both, and I think they're both just as legitimate, and we need to be able to.
And the evidence-based, background research on mindfulness, on nature, on, as a healing tool, it's all really just exploded in the last, 40, 50 years in particular. But
yes. Yeah, it's, another term for it is like transpersonal psychology, which is our psychological relationship with the non-human world, whether it's art, psychedelics, nature, and spirit worlds, and so people do find healing in these more holistic kind of transpersonal relationships. And
absolutely. It's about relationship, right? And the relationship, again, like we said at the top, was not just you and me, right? It's
not just relationship
internal, external, place, people, nature, everything.
Yeah, it's a relationship with the external world, not just our own little thoughts and feelings, right? Like it's being in a relationship with the other, whether human or not. But,
Thank you, Laura. This has been so amazing. what a great conversation this was. So for these events, if they want to get in touch with you, how would they do so? And what socials do you want to plug or anything like that?
Yeah, people can follow me on Instagram. The Natural Intuitive is my Instagram handle. You can find me on LinkedIn, Laura Cohen. And my email is info@lauracohen.org.
And all of this will be in the show notes, so it'll be with live links and everything, so they can just click and do that. I wanted to ask regarding your events you have. Do you ever do things in here in the States?
I don't, but the workshop I'm doing on image-based projective techniques, like using tarot in a clinical setting, will be open to the world. So
that's cool. That's a virtual event. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
May
cool.
22nd.
Very cool. May 22nd.
Yeah.
All right, and you can reach out. All the links will be in the show notes. And thank you so much, Laura. This was such an amazing show.
Thanks for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Okay. All right. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Nature of Mental Health. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow, rate, and share the show. It helps others find their way to this community. For more resources, visit riverstonementalhealth.com. Until next time, notice the small spaces where nature meets your day. Stay curious, and may you find resilience in every season.